Subscribe, like, and lock yourself in. Because once these gates close, there's no way out, and what happens inside San Quentin doesn't stay buried for long. When prison fights turn deadly. San Quentin violence stories. The alarm screamed through the East Block just before dawn, slicing through the damp, metallic air. Officers ran toward the tier, boots pounding concrete, radios crackling with fragments of panic. An inmate lay motionless near the showers, the steam still curling upward as if nothing had happened. By the time medical arrived, the yard lights had snapped on, bathing the scene in a harsh white glow. The report would later call it a fight. Inside San Quentin, everyone knew that word meant something else entirely. San Quentin State Prison sits like a relic on the edge of the bay, ancient walls, rusted bars, and a reputation built on decades of blood and silence. Overcrowded units hum with tension, where alliances shift by the hour and a look held too long can spark consequences no one can stop. The inmate found that morning had been quiet, recently transferred, trying to learn the rules no handbook explains. He'd crossed a line he didn't know existed. Investigators arrived before sunrise, faces set, eyes scanning for what the walls would never say. They spoke to officers first, then to inmates who stared back with practiced emptiness. In San Quentin, talking can be as dangerous as fighting. A scrap of cloth near the drains. A broken broom handle discarded behind a locker. Clues surfaced, but each one raised a harder question. Why did this happen now? The victim had argued earlier that week, nothing dramatic, just words exchanged in a chow line over a seat. In another place, it would have ended there. Here, it marked him. Rumors rippled through the tiers. A debt unpaid, a sign of disrespect, the wrong color worn on the wrong day. The prison's unwritten codes moved faster than any guard. As the body was wheeled away, the yard fell into a heavy quiet. Officers locked down units, searching cells, confiscating anything that could be sharpened or swung. But the damage was already done. Somewhere in the shadows, the real story waited. One that didn't fit neatly into incident reports or disciplinary logs. Then a veteran officer made a discovery that changed the direction of the case. Hidden behind a loose panel near the showers was a crude list of names, scratched deep into the metal. One was circled. And beneath it, a date, today. Chapter 2. The lockdown stretched into its second day, and San Quentin felt tighter, louder, even in silence. Doors slammed shut in sequence, steel echoing through the tiers like a countdown. Inside their cells, inmates listened, not for announcements, but for movement. In this place, information traveled faster than official orders, and everyone already knew the name that had been circled. Investigators focused on the list found behind the shower wall. It wasn't random. Every name etched into the metal belonged to inmates involved in past yard incidents, fights that never made headlines, assaults quietly labeled mutual combat. The circled name was the victim's. The date suggested intent, not impulse. This hadn't been a fight that turned deadly. It had been scheduled. As officers began pulling inmates for questioning, tension spiked. One witness, a lifer with decades inside, finally spoke, but only after ensuring cameras were rolling. He explained the rule without saying it outright. Never embarrass another inmate publicly. The victim had done exactly that during the argument in the chow line, calling out someone connected to a powerful group. The words were small. The consequences were not. Behind the scenes, the prison administration scrambled. San Quentin had a long history of violence rooted in racial politics and gang influence, and every serious incident threatened to ignite something bigger. Transfers were delayed. Yard time was cancelled. Officers worked double shifts, exhausted and wary. They knew retaliation often came in waves. Then evidence began to vanish. The broom handle recovered near the showers disappeared from the evidence locker overnight. Surveillance footage from a critical hallway malfunctioned at the exact moment investigators requested it. Whether it was incompetence or something darker, no one could say, but the pattern was familiar. A young correctional officer broke ranks and hinted at the truth. Control inside San Quentin wasn't absolute. Certain inmates enforced order long before guards arrived, deciding who was protected and who was expendable. Violence wasn't chaos, it was structure. And once a decision was made, stopping it was nearly impossible. Meanwhile, word spread that a suspect had been identified, only to be quietly transferred to another unit before charges were filed. Officially, it was for his safety. Unofficially, it meant the case was losing momentum. Families outside demanded answers. Inside, inmates read the message clearly. The system had limits. Late that night, an investigator reviewed old files and noticed a chilling pattern. Every major deadly fight at San Quentin over the past decade followed the same arc. Minor conflict, ignored warning signs, a sudden explosion of violence, and then silence. But this time, one detail didn't fit. The victim had asked for protective custody 2 days before his death. The request was denied. The revelation about the denied protective custody request sent a quiet shock through the investigation. Inside San Quentin, that detail mattered more than any weapon or witness statement. Asking for protection was a last resort, an unspoken admission that something had already been decided. The victim knew he was marked. The system knew it too, and still left him exposed. Investigators shifted focus from the yard to the paperwork. Requests, denials, signatures. A trail of forms revealed delays that made no sense. The victim's warning had been logged, stamped, and passed along, yet no action followed. In a prison where minutes could mean survival, 2 full days had slipped by. Someone had chosen not to intervene. Tension rose as rumors spread through the blocks. Inmates whispered that another attack was coming. When lockdown eased briefly, a fight erupted near the phones, fast, brutal, contained. Officers broke it up within seconds, but the message was clear: the pressure inside San Quentin was peaking. Violence wasn't random anymore. It was contagious. A second witness came forward, this time anonymously. Through a secure channel, he described a closed-door meeting the night before the killing. Representatives from rival groups had gathered, not to negotiate peace, but to agree on boundaries. The victim's name had been mentioned. Once that happened, the outcome was inevitable. Breaking the rule had consequences, and enforcement was part of the prison's internal order. As the investigation tightened, so did resistance. Supervisors warned detectives to tread carefully. San Quentin's reputation was already under scrutiny, and another scandal could bring federal oversight. Pressure mounted to label the death an isolated incident, a fight gone wrong. But the evidence refused to cooperate. Medical reports showed the injuries were too precise, too controlled, to be spontaneous. The timing aligned perfectly with a shift change, a moment when supervision was thinnest. Even the location, near the showers, out of direct camera view, suggested planning. This wasn't chaos. It was choreography. Then another alarming discovery surfaced. The officer who denied the protective custody request had approved several similar denials tied to previous violent incidents. Each time, the result was the same: an inmate injured or dead within days. It pointed to negligence at best, complicity at worst. As night fell, San Quentin buzzed with unease. Officers patrolled harder, inmates stayed alert, and everyone waited for the fallout. The truth was closing in, but so was danger. Because in a place like this, exposing the system didn't just threaten careers. It threatened lives, especially for those still inside. The final pieces came together under the harsh glow of a midnight briefing room. By now, the investigation had outgrown the walls of San Quentin. External agencies were quietly looped in, and oversight officials began asking questions no one inside the prison wanted to answer. The killing was no longer just about a fight, it was about a system that had learned to look away. Confronted with the evidence, administrators tried to reframe the narrative. They spoke of overcrowding, staffing shortages, and unpredictable inmate behavior. But the paper trail told a different story. The denied protection request. The repeated pattern of warnings ignored. The timing of the attack. Each detail pointed to the same conclusion: this death had been preventable. The officer at the center of the denials was placed on leave, but it felt symbolic rather than decisive. Interviews revealed a culture where protective custody requests were treated as inconveniences, not alarms. Granting them meant paperwork, relocation, and disruption. Denying them kept the machine moving, until it didn't. Inside the prison, the consequences were immediate. Lockdowns stretched longer. Rival groups were separated. Tension thickened the air. Inmates knew the rules hadn't changed, only the spotlight. The same codes still governed survival, and everyone understood that once the attention faded, things would return to normal. Then came the final twist. A previously sealed incident report surfaced, buried in archives from years earlier. It described a nearly identical killing, same location, same circumstances, same denied request for protection. Different victim. Different decade. The conclusion back then had been the same, too. Inmate-on-inmate violence, no fault found. The pattern was undeniable now. San Quentin wasn't reacting to violence, it was absorbing it, normalizing it, letting it repeat. Fights turned deadly not because they were sudden, but because they were expected. Predictable. Managed. Public pressure followed swiftly. Headlines questioned accountability. Families demanded answers. Officials promised reforms, reviews, and task forces. Cameras returned to the prison gates, capturing statements filled with concern and carefully chosen words. But for those inside, the reality remained unchanged. The victim's name became another entry in a long list, remembered briefly, then overshadowed by the next incident. His mistake wasn't starting a fight. It was breaking the one rule that mattered most, trusting the system to protect him when the warning signs were already flashing red. San Quentin stood silent as the case closed, its walls holding decades of similar stories. Because when prison fights turn deadly, the violence isn't just between inmates. It's built into the silence that follows, and the certainty that it will happen again.